Welcome to the Cananaya Report. I'm Eli Wilson Jr. If Mahalia's a Cadillac and Roberta's a Buick, I's just a Model T Ford. But I makes it over the hill without shifting gears. And that's what counts, church. I makes it over the hill. Sallie Martin. Sallie Martin, born in Pittsfield, Georgia in 1995, is known as the mother of gospel music. Martin and Thomas Dorsey laid a foundation for gospel music that would pave the way for many gospel artists to follow. For many years, Martin and Dorsey were inseparable partners, but it was a rocky relationship. Sallie's dad died when she was very young. She was raised by her mother and grandmother. Sallie's mom traveled from place to place as a singer. That's what gave Sallie the desire to do the same. Sallie quit school in the 8th grade to go to Atlanta. She made a living doing several menial jobs such as babysitting, cleaning houses, washing clothes, and cooking. Sallie grew up in the Baptist church, but while in Atlanta, she became a part of the Pentecostal church. Their doctrine, their mannerisms, and the musical freedoms of the Pentecostal Holiness Church would become a hallmark of her singing career to the very end. In 1927, Martin, along with her husband and son, moved first to Cleveland before moving to Chicago. There again, Sallie began working the same kinds of menial jobs as she did in Atlanta. Sallie's home was not a saved home. She and her husband began selling barbecue to the church next door, and they did well financially until her husband decided to add moonshine and gambling. Sallie expressed her dismay over and over again, but she was ignored. So Sallie packed up and decided to take her son and leave. After leaving her husband, the only work she could find was in a contagious hospital. Sallie began singing in her church during prayer meetings and Bible studies. Meanwhile, she began hearing about a former blues pianist turned gospel musician who was considered the top gospel musician in Chicago, Thomas A. Dorsey. She wanted to meet him, but didn't know how. Then she met a lady named Mrs. Dennis, who knew Dorsey and got her an audience with him. She auditioned for Dorsey, but he didn't care for her voice. It was not refined enough, and he didn't care for her Pentecostal way of singing. Dorsey also didn't like the fact that she couldn't read music. So Martin developed another plan to get his attention. She found every place he was going to be performing and tried to get on the program. After hearing her 3 times, Dorsey still didn't like her voice. It was Theodore Fry that convinced Dorsey to make her a part of his group. So he did. However, it was about a year before he gave Sallie a solo. Though he didn't like her voice, he could not deny the way she related to an audience and the way they responded to her, particularly when she was singing his songs. Eventually, they began working a little closer. It was the beginning of their partnership. Martin had a head for business, unlike Dorsey. Sallie began trying to convince Dorsey that he had more than he realized. He needed to do a better job at marketing his sheet music. Sallie said, "Really, you have something here, but you don't know what to do with it." So Dorsey replied, "You think you can do better?" Sallie said, "I know I can." Dorsey said, "Okay, I'll pay you $4 a week." Martin said, "You got a deal." The first thing she did was set up gospel choirs all over the South and Midwest. She employed young singers like Mahalia Jackson and Roberta Martin to introduce Dorsey's music. She then organized a music store and hired assistants to work the counter and kept accurate records of what was sold. Within a matter of a few months, the store was showing a profit. However, the East Coast and the West Coast had not been exposed to Dorsey and his music. So together, Dorsey and Sallie took a trip to Philadelphia where they met with Madame Gertrude Ward and her two daughters, Clara and Willa. They helped introduce Dorsey's music to the East Coast. Then Sallie, on her own, traveled to Los Angeles, California to introduce Dorsey's music there. She chose to visit Angelus Temple, pastored by Amy McPherson, a white evangelist with a mega ministry. Evangelist McPherson had a real compassion for the working class migrant and who comprised her congregation. Her services were completely integrated, blacks and whites shouting together. They always got happy on Sallie's singing. But the success of Dorsey and Martin's partnership did not come without controversy. Those close to Dorsey began complaining about Sallie. They felt that she was arrogant and condescending. Truth is, Sallie was argumentative and confrontational. She and Dorsey had many confrontations. After several complaints, Dorsey decided to confront Martin himself to tell her about what the others were saying. Sallie's immediate response was, "I tell you the truth, brother, I wouldn't care to hear nothing that anyone said." Martin walked out and told Dorsey, "You can have it." After that, Sallie tried traveling as a soloist with her pianist, a very young, talented girl by the name of Ruth Jones, who would eventually become one of the world's premier gospel singers. She changed her name to Dinah Washington. Sallie's traveling solo career didn't last long. She then joined forces with a young pianist from Northwestern University by the name of Roberta Martin. She was a great singer who could read, write, and arrange music. In fact, under Roberta Martin, Sallie learned to read music. Roberta's temperament was the exact opposite of Sallie's. Her group had some fine soloists, fine singers. Narcissus McKissick, Eugene Smith, Robert Anderson, and Willie Webb. They were called the Martin and Martin Singers, but their relationship didn't last long. From there, she organized her own group, the Sallie Martin Singers. It was the first all-female group in gospel. Shortly after leaving Dorsey, Reverend Clarence Cobb, pastor of the First Church of Deliverance in Chicago, told Sallie that she should open her own business. Cobb said to her, "I got a young man over at my church named Kenneth Morris who's doing nothing with his talent." So, financed by Reverend Cobb, Sallie and Kenneth Morris joined forces to form the Martin and Morris Publishing Company. Sallie handled the business, and Kenneth, who had tuberculosis, took care of the songwriting. The company's first hit was Morris's arrangement of Just a Closer Walk with Thee. Without having recorded it, the song sold hundreds of thousands of copies. The Sallie Martin Singers performed exclusively Martin and Morris's compositions. Another one of their hits was He'll Wash You Whiter Than Snow. Sallie recorded it with Alex Bradford. However, the recording industry was not kind to Sallie. They didn't like her voice. But that didn't deter Sallie. She went on to sing to crowds large and small. In fact, she became one of the wealthiest women in gospel. She was also a philanthropist, helping other singers along the way and contributing to the civil rights movement. She was invited to Africa by Dr. King, where she paid for access to electricity in Nigeria. There is a building there named in her honor. Dr. Horace Boyer writes, after Dorsey retired from composing music, Martin once again became his right hand in his gospel ministry. She remained vice president of the National Convention of Choirs and Choruses until she retired. In an interview toward the end of her life, she is recorded to have said, I tell you one thing, I've never craved to be rich, but I can really tell you this. Whatever I desired from a child, the Lord has given it to me, because I didn't ask for a whole lot. And yet, in a way, I think it's a great big blessing. I said, when I was 16, I'd like to go to Paris. I want to go to London. I really would like to have a home. All of it come to pass. Now, Sallie said, I've been to Paris 3 or 4 times. Sallie died in 1988, June 18th, 1988, in Chicago. Because of Sallie Martin's contributions to gospel music reached a new level. And she had a right to be accorded the title Mother of Gospel Music. This has been an Eli Wilson Ministries presentation on the history of gospel music, Part 2. Drop me a line and tell me what you think about the series and perhaps what other topics you'd like addressed. My email address is eli@eliwilsonjr.com. Thank you so much for listening.